Between the 1500s and 1800s, an estimated 12 million African people were stolen from their homelands and trafficked across the Atlantic as chattel property. Only 10.5 to 10.7 million survived the crossing. Close to 2 million souls never set foot on the foreign shores. They had been stolen to serve. Some perished under brutal force. Others wasted away from utter despair. Many succumbed to dehydration, starvation, smallpox, raging fevers, dysentery, or the slow, irreversible breakdown of the human body, in an atmosphere so fetid that drawing breath itself became a torment. To grasp the full weight of this atrocity, we must abandon the narrow framing of the slave ship as a simple mode of transport. Its purpose was not merely to ferry human cargo between continents. It transmuted captivity into chronic illness, and turned the Atlantic Ocean into a thoroughfare ravaged by contagion. Suffering took root long before captives ever stepped foot aboard a ship. Most were seized deep inland and forced on grueling marches across vast distances, battered, famished, terrified, torn apart from the communities, kin, and native tongues that anchored their identities and worldviews. By the time they reached the coastal trading posts, countless captives were already physically weakened. Many would linger for weeks or even months, locked inside coastal fortresses, barracoons, and overcrowded holding compounds, before embarkation. Sickness did not originate at sea, it gathered lethal momentum at every stage of abduction. Chronic hunger, untreated wounds, constant fear, cramped detention quarters, contaminated drinking water, and the total collapse of ordinary daily life steadily eroded bodily resilience, priming captives' bodies for the horrors the ship would soon inflict. Then came the coast, then the ship, then the suffocating hold. Do not picture an anchored ship as a symbolic icon alone. See it for what it was, a cold, calculating machine. Built from timber, rigged with rope and reinforced with iron, stocked with barrels of supplies and billowing sails, it featured cargo bays meticulously mapped in ledgers by men fixated on how many human bodies could be packed beneath the deck. Ship owners chased maximum profit. Captains aimed to fetch the highest resale price. Crew members sought absolute dominance over the enslaved. Every person forced onto the ship was valued solely as inventory, that needed to stay alive long enough to be sold. Never as a human life worthy of safety, dignity, or mercy. This ruthless calculus is what rendered the slave ship so lethally dangerous. It was engineered not to preserve human health, but to preserve a commodity. The two objectives are irreconcilable. Below deck, the air degraded first. People were packed shoulder to hip, unable to stand upright or roll over without jostling those beside them. Body heat pooled in the airless enclosure, thickening every breath. Sweat-soaked skin and rotting wooden planks alike. Seasickness spread instantly, and waste accumulated with no means of proper disposal. The hold reeked of vomit, feces, dried blood, brine, unwashed bodies, and abject fear. In calm seas, the stagnant heat grew suffocating. When storms struck, hatches were battened shut, trapping captives inside air already too toxic to sustain life. A transatlantic slave ship twisted every basic biological need into a weapon against the body. Breathing turned into labor, sleep into agony, eating into a desperate fight for survival, and waste into the very air its prisoners were forced to inhale. Disease required no arduous search for a transmission route. It had been handed a clear, unobstructed path. Dysentery, known to sailors of the era simply as the flux, ranked among the deadliest afflictions of the Middle Passage. The name belies its devastation. Relentless diarrhea, crippling dehydration, extreme physical debilitation, and rampant infection amplified by unhygienic conditions. On a slave ship, dysentery was never an isolated sickness afflicting a single individual. It seeped into the ship's entire environment. The sick could not be quarantined. Waste could not be sanitized. Fresh water was rationed to the bare minimum. Clean bedding was a non-existent luxury. The hold itself became a breeding ground for pathogens. Contagion spread via bare hands, bare skin, splintered floorboards, shared buckets, and the unavoidable claustrophobic closeness of people, stripped of all ability to protect themselves. Smallpox brought another wave of terror. In such overcrowded quarters, a single infected passenger endangered everyone on board. Fevers flared across groups, blistering lesions erupted across skin, and panic outpaced any attempt to explain or contain the illness. Captives hailed from disparate African regions, each with unique immunological histories and varying vulnerability to unfamiliar pathogens. Crew members also faced disease risks, particularly along the African coastline, where malaria and yellow fever preyed upon European sailors, but suffering was never distributed equally. The crew held authority, mobility, weapons, and access to resources. Captives knew only confinement. Contagion might sweep through the entire vessel, but power dictated who would be trapped alongside the sickness with no escape. This is what distinguishes the slave ship from a natural disaster. Its horrific conditions were entirely human-engineered. The suffering was not an accidental byproduct of ocean travel. It was baked into the architecture of the transatlantic slave trade. Every plank laid beneath the deck was part of a mercantile equation. How many people could fit? How little water would keep them breathing? How minimal a food ration would retain their market value? How much deprivation could be inflicted before mortality rates cut too deeply into profits? When medical care existed aboard these ships, it too served market logic. Surgeons and medicine chests were not deployed out of a modern sense of compassionate care. They were tools meant only to minimize financial loss. A sick enslaved person was not treated as a patient, but as damaged inventory at risk of losing its selling price. Any semblance of public health practice aboard, devolved into nothing more than inventory management. This is why the Middle Passage rightfully belongs within the global history of pandemics, not because every ship hosted the identical outbreak, nor because it was defined by one single illness, but because the slave trade systematically replicated every environmental condition required for epidemics to thrive. Extreme overcrowding, inadequate ventilation, scarce potable water, unmanaged waste and contamination, chronic malnutrition, forced immobility, exposure to foreign pathogens, unrelenting psychological trauma, and the complete erasure of individual bodily autonomy. These are not incidental details. They form the anatomical blueprint of an epidemic space. An outbreak is never purely biological. It is architectural, spatial, economic and political all at once. On a slave ship, every one of these oppressive forces bore down upon the same vulnerable bodies. Imagine a single day adrift at sea. There is no privacy, no meaningful rest. The ship heaves and rolls against the waves. Someone coughs into the blackness. A neighbor cannot keep down the meager rations they are given. Another is too weak to prop themselves upright. One mourns a child, a sibling, a partner or a parent torn away forever. Two strangers beside one another speak no shared language to offer comfort. Some refuse food as an act of resistance, only to have it forced down their throats. Others are beaten for defiance. Some whisper prayers. Some count the passing days, with no clue where their journey will end. Above deck, sailors scan the horizon and calculate nautical miles. Below deck, the bodies of the enslaved become the parchment, upon which imperial conquest writes its violent legacy, etched into skin by fever, hunger, salt spray, and iron manacles. The ship drifts steadily west, carrying sickness in its wake. The Atlantic could not erase the civilizations these people left behind, but it severed those ties with unspeakable violence. Enslaved men, Women and children were ripped from homelands, /kin networks, /social standing, /spiritual traditions, /native languages and personal memory, this existential rupture compounded physical illness. Bodies weakened not only from pathogens, but from terror, grief, acute shock, and the annihilation of everything familiar. Despair often snuffed out the will to live entirely. Many captives resisted in quiet and overt ways, through hunger strikes, mutiny, stubborn silence, the preservation of ancestral memory, and clinging fiercely to their names, songs and faith, others did not survive the voyage, to reduce the tragedy of the Middle Passage to disease alone, would be a grave oversimplification. Yet to omit illness entirely, would erase a critical layer of violence. Sickness was the physical manifestation of subjugation crafted by the ship itself. Domination manifested as fever. Greed manifested as dysentery. The vastness of the crossing manifested as dehydration. The entire transatlantic trafficking enterprise curdled into a man-made medical catastrophe driven by commerce. Its epidemic history stands apart from that of urban plagues for a stark reason. A city struck by disease might plead ignorance, claiming its residents lacked an understanding of how infection spreads. The slave trade cannot claim such innocence. It was built upon intentional violence. Even when captains fully understood that overcrowding spiked death tolls, profit pressure pushed them to pack holds to dangerous capacity. Even as crew members watched sickness spread through the lower decks, captives remained locked in confinement. Even when rising mortality ate into merchant earnings, the solution was never freedom, dignity, or humane passage. It was tighter discipline, adjusted rations, brief bursts of ventilation, forced exercise and medication deployed solely to preserve resale value. The system never asked how to protect human beings. It only asked how to keep enough human beings alive to sell. This fundamental moral divide sits at the heart of this history. Still, the people trapped in the holds were never passive cargo. They were people. Before ledgers assigned them numbers, they bore given names. Before the trade shattered their families, they belonged to loved ones. They possessed crafts, languages, oral histories, rituals, humor, fears, and futures, all stolen outright. Every statistical entry in a shipping log was once a person, who had felt sunlight beyond the ship's hull, who had known the contours of a homeland before meeting the open ocean, who had belonged somewhere before being locked below deck. When Contagion swept through the hold, it moved through human lives, not merchandise, mothers and infants, farmers and traders, traditional healers and metalworkers, youth and elders, people, never meant to be condensed into a single line on a shipping manifest. Most surviving records are commercial documents tallied for trade purposes, embarkation numbers, disembarkation counts, dates, ports of call, owner and captain names, and mortality percentages. These archives are indispensable to historical record, yet cold and dehumanizing. They quantify how many were taken and how many arrived alive, but they cannot capture the sounds echoing through the hold after dark. They cannot name who knelt to soothe a dying stranger. They cannot recall who repeated a beloved child's name to hold on to hope. They cannot describe the prisoners staring out at the endless water, realizing even the horizon had become a prison wall. This demands deliberate, compassionate storytelling. The Middle Passage was far more than a logistical route within the Atlantic economy. It is an irreparable wound carved into human history, and disease gave that wound a quantifiable form. Mortality fluctuated drastically across eras, trade routes, individual ships and voyage conditions. In the earliest decades of the trade, death rates could surge above 20%. Later averages fell, yet remained devastating. With typical mortality hovering between 10 and 15%, across centuries and voyages. but percentages sanitize horror, 10% death on a ship carrying hundreds is no abstract figure, it means dozens of vanished people, unrecorded names, bodies cast overboard into the sea, and grief with no grave to anchor it. The Atlantic became the slave trade's largest burial ground, yet it offered none of the closure a cemetery provides. A graveyard grants the deceased a resting place, the ocean often denied them even that small mercy. Sickness was also inextricably tied to time. The longer captives were detained on the African coast awaiting departure, the more disease festered before the voyage even began. The longer the crossing dragged on, the greater the risk of depleted drinking water, spoiled provisions, and bodies worn down by prolonged illness. Storms, navigational error, captive uprisings and trade delays could prolong journeys indefinitely, and every extra day at sea exacted a physical toll. Another day breathing toxic air, another day rationed to a sip of water, another day burning with fever amid filth, another day for a weakened body to fail completely, the ship functioned as a clock, and every tick marked another increment of suffering, the epidemic did not end the moment land came into view, arrival did not signal recovery, most survivors reached the Americas gravely ill, traumatized, malnourished and injured, immediately exposed to unfamiliar local pathogens. Many perished within weeks of docking, during what enslavers termed the seasoning period, bodies forced to adapt to alien climates, backbreaking plantation labor, foreign illnesses, and relentless violent oppression. The slave ship merely delivered its prisoners into a second public health crisis. The floating epidemic transferred onto plantations. The hold was replaced by field rows, and the auction block became another stage where bodies were inspected, priced and torn apart from one another. Disease never interrupted slavery. It traveled alongside it, shaping who survived trafficking, who was resold, who was deemed economically viable, who was discarded as worthless, who was blamed for their own sickness, and who was forced to toil while critically unwell. This is the damning continuity of the system. The exact conditions that bred disease at sea were replicated on land. Cramped living quarters, insufficient food, punitive overwork, negligible medical care, routine violence, forced separation from family, and constant exposure to harm. The slave ship was no anomaly. It was the origin point of a sprawling public health catastrophe embedded within racial capitalism. Its harm outlived single voyages, single ports and single generations. The collective health trajectory of the African diaspora was indelibly shaped by forced displacement, intergenerational trauma, chronic malnutrition, endemic infectious disease, systemic medical neglect, and the pervasive ideology, that black bodies existed to be exploited, studied, experimented upon, and consumed for profit. To label slave ships floating epidemics is not merely a rhetorical metaphor. It acknowledges that the slave trade produced tangible biological harm through state-sanctioned social violence. It turned illness into a profitable cost of business, made survival conditional on market value, and subordinated human bodily well-being entirely to the demands of the marketplace. The ship's hold stands as one of history's most explicit demonstrations, of how power can design an environment primed for mass infection, then dismiss resulting deaths as regrettable side effects. These deaths were never collateral damage. They were factored into the trade's bottom line from the start. Investors funding these voyages knew people would die. They knew not every captive would outlive the journey. They knew contagion would spread through the holds. Still they authorized departures. Still they ordered holds packed to maximum capacity. Still they counted living survivors as legitimate returns on investment. This is why the critical question is not only how disease spread aboard slave ships, but what kind of society could legitimize such a vessel as a center of commerce rather than a site of atrocity. Today, the iconic schematic diagrams of slave ship layouts strike viewers as almost surreal in their sterile order, rendering unfathomable cruelty with crisp, clean lines, but that ordered arrangement was itself an act of violence, the drawings reduce human beings to units of measurable space, laying bare the core logic of compression. How many bodies fit within these bounds? How tightly can they be pressed together? How little movement can be permitted? This visual framework framed basic respiration as a logistical problem, and disease slipped directly through that calculated dehumanization. Transmission followed the geometric constraints of captivity. The closer the bodies, the faster contagion spread. The thinner the air, the weaker lung function became. The scarcer the water, the faster dehydration set in. The poorer the sanitation, the more virulent intestinal illnesses grew. The more total the loss of freedom, the fewer avenues left to fight for survival. When studying conventional pandemics, historians often examine gaps in contemporary scientific knowledge. When examining the Middle Passage, we must instead confront deliberate willful ignorance. Ship crews and captains lacked a formal understanding of germ theory, but they possessed full awareness of human suffering. They could smell the putrid air. They knew the hold was a death trap. They recognized overcrowding killed. They understood mortality was an expected feature of the voyage. The greatest tragedy is not the limitations of contemporary medicine, but that the system required no advanced medical knowledge to recognize it was destroying human life. It only required enough indifference to continue the exploitation unabated. Yet within this manufactured sphere of death, resistance persisted. Captives rose up in mutiny. They refused sustenance to deny their enslavers profit. They preserved ancestral stories and cultural memory. They endured through spiritual fortitude. They comforted the dying in the pitch dark. They clung to life even when every structural force on the ship was engineered to break them. The existence of African diasporic communities across the Atlantic world is living proof that the ship failed to erase everything it sought to annihilate. Cultures endured, languages evolved into new forms, and musical traditions, spiritual practices, foodways. Acts of resistance and inherited memory crossed the ocean alongside people the trade intended to reduce to nothing more than labor. The slave ship was a space of death, but it was equally a battlefield where survival fought against systems built to annihilate it. This history must hold both truths simultaneously. The slave ship was a drifting hotbed of epidemic disease, yet the people trapped within were far more than passive victims of illness. They endured one of the most violent systems ever constructed by humanity. And countless carried their memories. Acts of resistance and inherent dignity intact. Even amid every attempt to strip them of all personhood. When we research disease within the Middle Passage, we do not only study pathogens, we study the lasting health repercussions of systemic enslavement. We examine how economic systems can dictate access to air, water, living space, food, medical aid, and mortality itself. We document how ruling classes can intentionally construct environments, engineered to spawn large-scale outbreaks in pursuit of gain. We recognize how the human body becomes a living archive, when official written records erase individual humanity entirely. Ship logs tallied bodies. Market ledgers tallied profit. Imperial powers tallied labor. Disease tallied exposure and agony. The Atlantic Ocean tallied the nameless dead. When we revisit the Middle Passage, we must stop framing disease as a secondary tragic detail. It was a cog in the exploitative machinery, a core component of terror, a line item prefigured in financial calculations. Slave ships became floating epidemic hubs because the transatlantic slave trade intentionally assembled every single condition pathogens require to multiply. Overcrowding, terror, unsanitary waste buildup, inadequate nourishment, restricted water, forced immobility, violent oppression, and the total denial of personhood. This is the suppressed public health truth embedded within the history of chattel slavery. Health is never merely a matter of medical treatment. It is a matter of power. It determines who breathes clean air. Who drinks safe water. Who is granted room to exist. Who receives care. And who is recognized as fully human. A ship can carry sickness, but a society chooses who will be locked inside that sickness with no escape. From this point forward, when we speak of the Middle Passage, we ought to speak not only of miles crossed over water, but of bodies crammed into a lethally dehumanizing structure. We ought to name the holds as unstaffed sick wards, lawless prisons and graveyards without headstones. We ought to honor those who suffered there not as cargo or statistical data, but as human beings whose physical and mental well-being was deliberately sacrificed to global markets. The Atlantic slave ship was never merely a craft cutting across waves. It was a disease ecosystem built on violence, sustained by profit, and memorialized in the lives it failed to deliver safely to shore. To uncover hidden histories of pandemics, exploitative labor, urban decay, maritime exploitation, and systems that treat human lives as the disposable cost of so-called civilization, subscribe to the Epidemic Archive. Leave a comment below to share what you would like explored next. The disease and public health history of plantation life, or another maritime domain where illness traveled hand in hand with imperial expansion.